Welcome to Milish Meets Paul Heaton. If you're a drinker, get yourself a beer out of the fridge. If you're not, put the kettle on, make a nice cup of tea or coffee and sit back as Paul invites me and you into his living room for 2 happy hours of conversation about life, music, football, politics, fame and money. Paul Heaton is a singer-songwriter who was never hidden behind the door when it comes to speaking out about politics and social issues. His CV of work and hit records is vast, from the Housemartins to the beautiful South, to his solo career, and to his recent reunion in the last couple of years with Jacqui Abbot. Hi Paul, you're very welcome to the Celtic Soul podcast. This time last year you were scheduled to be on tour in Ireland, and we were all looking forward to catching you live again in Dublin and Belfast after that brilliant gig on the Trinity College cricket pitch, a place I never thought I'd get to dance to Paul Heaton.
Hello there. You okay?
All good, Paul.
I didn't even know it was a cricket pitch.
Either did I until my mate pointed it out.
Right, yeah. Looking back at it now, the thing that looked like a pavilion must have been the pavilion. So yeah,
A fantastic gig.
Yeah, it was lovely. Really nice evening. Really lovely setting, and I think those outdoor ones, as we've got older, they've become more and more friendly and more. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you can probably see on stage that we're enjoying it as much as the people in the audience. You know, it's really, really good fun, quite touching as well. You know.
Yeah, and I remember that night going into the gig. There was no pushing or shoving, and even coming out when we were all leaving at the same time. And, you know, with the little whiskey tent and stuff like that. So as we do get older, I think we're getting a bit more sense maybe.
Yeah. I remember the first few gigs in Ireland, and they were a long, long way from that. The first time we played in Dublin was absolutely mad. And Belfast too. Belfast was crazy.
That was 86 in the Olympic
ballroom? Right, yeah. Really mad.
I wasn't at that gig. The first time I saw you was in the SFX.
Right.
And it was the farm that was supporting you. And we had Peter on the podcast a couple of weeks, and we reminisced about that night and how excited I was as a young teenager going to my first proper gig and going up to the Big Smoke, because I live in Drogheda, about 30 miles down the road. So at that time, it was a big thing to go to a gig. But you know, we've been back a few times to see it, and we just spoke there about. I mentioned as a teenager going. The first time I saw the Housemartins was the video of Happy Hour on Top of the Pops. Although I was telling a mate today, I was interviewing it, and he says, no, we saw them on the Tube during Flag Day. But I think he was just trying to be cool, Paul, because I can't remember that. But what stuck out, you know, that day was Paul Heaton's music, words, attitude. And all three would influence me, Paul, back in the 80s, in my younger years. Were you aware back then the effect the band was having on youngsters, I suppose, because you were a little older than us? Because up until then, Paul, we were all in musical tribes. We were skinheads, punks, rockers, rude boys, Smith's heads, whatever it was. But then when I went to that gig in the SFX, you know, I saw all sorts. I saw, you know, a mix of people. There was a lot of kind of politics happening outside. There was a lot of pamphlets, a lot of leaflets being given out. Yeah. And 2 things to stick out in my mind from that night, Paul, was the lyrics. Even when the Queen was charming. Sorry.
You're worse than I am with the lyrics.
Well, you have a lot more to sing than me.
Yeah.
Even when the kids were starving, they all thought the Queen was charming, which is something that's always stuck with me. But another thing you said at that gig was, you said, being Irish, you're bombarded with shit every day, like the Sun newspaper. And that was 1987. And I still remember those words. And they're as true now as they were then. And over all those years since 1987, the shit we were bombarded with by the likes of the Sun newspaper.
Yeah, exactly. There's yeah, I mean, at the time, first to answer your first question, no, I don't think I realised how much of an influence we were over the different groups. But I think it's sort of England was always going to be worse than Ireland anyway. I think people in England stuck to their groups more rigidly. You know, like there was more snobbery in England towards music, whilst if there was a decent band with a decent tune, young Irish people would go along to see it. Do you know what I mean? Even though they might be of different groups. And because we didn't stick our, I don't know what the expression is really, but we didn't pin our colours to any one mast, we would get skinheads coming along. We'd get a few early football casuals, this and that. So I think that was always important, and we looked a little bit of everything anyway. You know, the way we was dressed. I'd quite often wear Doc Marten shoes, you know, jeans turned up, but I also wore a Pringle top. So we weren't really falling into any group. But I was delighted when I got over to Ireland, because that was the first time really I saw that in England we had a big indie following, you know, like all based around John Peel, because he'd built us up from playing Flag Day in 1985 or maybe even the year before. And so over in England, we were sort of followed by indie kids. But as soon as we got over to Ireland, I mean, as I said, particularly the first one in '86 at the Olympic, it was, the atmosphere was crazy. The people dropping down jumping off the balconies, which it was sort of like, you know, we'd be singing an a cappella song, you know, Heaven Help Us All or something like that. And there's been this terrible thud, you know, like you look around and one of the kids had just jumped, which was just, it was incredible for us. So I liked the fact that when we got to Ireland, there was different groups of people. And as I say, in Belfast too, I think we appealed to, I wouldn't say both sides of the division, but I suppose we had a bit for everybody. You know, like people could come along and they could just listen to a song like Happy Hour. You know, they wouldn't have to be political, but if you wanted to see politics in it, then there was other songs like, you know, Get Up Off Our Knees, or later the one you're talking about, people getting themselves to death. So, and the thing about the Sun, yeah, I mean, I didn't envisage that position changing really. You know, it's the British press, isn't it? And I don't know whether in '87 it was before or after the campaign. It was probably after the campaign they'd had against me in the paper. But I realised, you know, I never bought the Sun, but I realised from the nature of those newspapers that we were always there's a good chance we were going to have a tough time by them, because everybody did. You know, they turned on everybody. They didn't like our politics, but I don't think they liked us anyway. You know,
you didn't fit their criteria, but you never were going to, Paul, because from the early albums and the early performances and who you supported was always, you know, especially as a teenager, you know, I was very drawn to what I was seeing outside the gigs as much as inside the gigs, because like you were given newspapers. I was starting to read at that time. You know, South Africa was very in the news. Yeah. Obviously, we had our own troubles here in Ireland, and I remember having an argument with a girl. It wasn't at one of your gigs. I was a little older, and she was going on about Palestine and South Africa, and I was just saying, we've got a bit of a problem here as well, you know. So maybe because it was cool, a lot of students, it was cool to be involved with Palestine or South Africa, but it wasn't so cool to say that, you know, you support Irish freedom or determination to freedom or United Ireland. It wasn't so cool then, Paul. It's a little cooler now, because we have mainstream politicians now coming out and backing it. Back then it wasn't so. But anyway, Paul, I don't want to get bogged down on my time going to see you. Growing up, Paul, football was a huge influence, but obviously music, politics. So what was a young Paul Heaton like?
Well, my household was sports, pure sports, really. We had my dad and three brothers, you know, two other brothers. I had two older brothers, and we were all involved in sport. My dad he was a coach at football. He'd been a footballer himself, you know, to a decent standard. Played golf off scratch. was a really good boxer, really good rugby player. His uncle had played for England Rugby Union, Jacqui Abbot. And it goes all the way through now. My brother's kid was England schools captain at golf, and his other kid is, like a semi-pro footballer. So it was all football, all sports. We were taught everything. And that was, like all our weekend would be football. And mainly going in my dad's car, with a big net full of footballs. And so, that's how I was brought up. We weren't really brought up on music at all. My mum and dad both loved. My mum's just passed away in October, November time, and my dad has passed away a long time ago. But I was just looking through her stuff, and they were really into their music. To go and watch live stuff. But we didn't have any instruments in the house. We had no music instruments. All we had was the radio. But it was weird. It was sort of music was in the background, football and all the other sports were in the foreground. But both my mum and dad had nice voices, nice singing voices. So it was an odd mix. There was no politics in the house at all. No discussion about politics. That's something that came to me later. I don't know how, because my brother, probably through my dad really, because my dad was this very, very fair person. He believed in, above all, treating everybody equally. So it was a good household, a happy household, and just football all the time, every Saturday and Sunday. And he wouldn't let me play football at school, or wouldn't let me play for the school, because he was an absolute purist, and unfortunately he came along and heard one of the teachers shout, "Get rid of it," and that was it. I had no chance to play for them again. So you don't use language like that on my boy. You can use it with the other players. Because I was told never to get rid of it. Do you know what I mean? The absolute opposite. As you look, do you know what I mean? So he was a real purist with football and very popular. And he ran teams really throughout his life. After we'd grown and left the home, he ran junior teams up until his 60s. My brother ran junior teams as well. I played till I was around about 40. I played about 700 games Saturday and Sunday, at senior level, that is, and managed them for another 10 years. Local side. It's just been football all my life, and most of the old Housemartins and Beautiful South gigs, the tours were arranged about getting me back on a Saturday or Sunday. If you look at all the old dates in the Beautiful South calendar, you can almost always see that we're playing in the north at the weekend, so I can get back to Hull or on the Saturday or the Sunday. So it was all about that really, and football. I the rest of me, at school, I was, I wasn't interested in school really, and I started becoming interested in sort of, I don't know what happened, because my two older brothers, they were, one of them became a scaffolder on leaving school, and the other one a lorry driver. But he's been a BT engineer, working for British Telecom since he was 17, and he's still in that job. But at some point at the age of 14, I started writing things down, and writing little songs and stuff like that. And then punk happened and the songs got angrier. And it was just something I did. And I left school like they did at 16, and I worked in an office for 3 years, just sat there like this, before computers. I was working in a bought ledger department for a paper company. It's like a company that did industrial magazines called Industrial Newspapers. So I did that for 3 years, and then I worked in a blind home for a year, just under a year, and then that was it. So I was also, I think, behind the politics. Another thing I should say is when I was 13, we moved from Sheffield to Surrey, and that politicised me. Because I suddenly became very proud of being from Sheffield, and got into a lot of arguments with people from Surrey. And although the school I went to in Surrey certainly wasn't a posh one, I sort of got a chip on my shoulder about being northern down south, So that sort of helped me develop arguing And yeah, the rest, yeah, it just gradually grew from there. And the other explosion musically for me was the miners' strike, which then politicised me further, because I've seen that almost as Yorkshire against the rest of the world. That's what it sort of felt like at the time. You know, Scargill was up against all the other, Sue Lawley on the, just the British press and everything. I could see it. Just, yeah. So that changed. The Housemartins became more political at that point as well. So, yeah.
I remember as a kid, Arthur Scargill coming to Drogheda to address the council. I remember that. And I remember the headlines in the local paper. That's one that sticks out, because we were like, the news. You would tune in every night to see the miners' strike, no matter what age you were over here, because there was bound to be aggro, and was, we mightn't have understood what was going on. My father would have, but when we were looking in, it was like, and of course we were brought up anti-Tory, so I'm not saying we were brought up, anti-English, but we certainly had more in common with the miners than we had with the Tories. So, and that was another, anyone that was fighting against the British government, probably, as we were looking in from Ireland, was a positive to us. But what happened to those communities, Paul, is because when you look to the communities in Scotland, that the people like Shankly and Steen and that came from, some of them communities are, because the mines are gone, they're completely gone.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of any resentment about English people, anywhere, I've never felt it, and the reason I've never felt it is I've never represented the British in a negative way abroad. Do you know what I mean? I go to Ireland, I realise I'm in a foreign country, and I respect the people of that country, and I don't go mouthing off about things that have upset the Irish in the past, quite simply. First of all, because historically I'm on their side, but secondly, I won't be such a dick. And I'm not such a dick to think that when somebody expresses English resentment, they're talking about me. This is the problem. They're not talking about me. They're talking about what the British government has done, and the history of the British government's involvement on the island. So I never take it. Same with, when people say things when they go to Scotland, obviously it's a different thing in Scotland, but I don't feel, I've never felt as though it's been targeted towards myself at all. And I think it's a misconception to ever describe how Irish people are feeling as, like anti-English. It's anti-British government, and it always has been and always will be, I'm sure there's a couple of people who don't like English people for different reasons, just as there's a few people, you go certain places that don't like you because you're wearing the wrong football shirt or you're too loud or whatever. That happens, But, I've not experienced it.
But you wrote a song about Ireland, and Jacqui has an Irish connection. She's Irish family, and you performed, I think it was on, not the last album, was it the album before that? Yeah. A lovely song about my country.
Yeah. Blackwater Banks, yeah.
Which sorry, Paul, I've added into my DJ set, and people look at me a bit strange when I play it.
Yeah, I've written a couple about Ireland, actually, but that's the only one I've sort of actually let go. But yeah, I don't know. It felt like just when Jacqui rejoined in 2014, we went back to Ireland quite a lot, and it really felt like when we were playing some of the beautiful South songs, which we hadn't played for a long time, say Rotterdam and things that Jacqui sung, I thought to myself, bloody hell, I've had a really long relationship with this country. Not just long, but I've come here a lot, as I have a lot of places, but it's always felt like people have sort of kept me in, and I was just thinking, I need to write a song about this, and how much I love travelling around the country and what I see when I, in different places of the country. So that was my reason for writing it. Also, I think it's been a long relationship. When things get to sort of a certain age, where I probably would have been like 54 when I wrote it. it's you start thinking things are important, you know, and particularly now, you know, now we can't travel. It's going to be incredible to go back to Ireland and some of these places that have been supporting me, you know, me music and everything since '85. You know, it's a long period. You know, I've played music I counted it up and I can't do maths, but it's 5 separate decades now that I've actually played music in. So it's a long relationship, you know, and it's worthy of a song, and it's worthy of thanks as well. I never fail these days when I go on stage to thank people for, you know, like 34 years of, you know, proper happiness and good communication and good friendship, you know.
It doesn't feel like 30-something years, Paul. It just like life's gone by in a flash when you think back to some of the gigs. But you mentioned Rotterdam now. You're back when Jacqui come back. You start doing it again in the set. I've never heard on the terrace, Paul, but I'll give you a little story. We were playing Feyenoord in a 4-way pre-season tournament. It was Tottenham, Borussia Dortmund, Celtic and Feyenoord, and the last game was Celtic and Feyenoord. Right. And because of the hooligan problem over there was a lot of hooligans in the train station, and basically the stadium's outside Rotterdam, so we were staying in Amsterdam, so they had a football express which didn't stop in. It brought us straight from Amsterdam. So we were all waiting to get on, and they had us in a kind of a caged paddock. Right. And there was a few people up the front kind of pushing, arguing with the Royal Police to let us out. We had to catch a train, and they were explaining that the train wouldn't go without us. They just needed to clear the Rotterdam fans, and it was no big deal. But a friend of mine started singing Rotterdam, and it went the whole way back. And if you know, if we had to have maybe a camera phone or something to capture it, everybody was singing it, and it just took the whole aggro out of the situation. Right. So unknown to yourself, lyrics you wrote had diffused a bit of aggro between Celtic fans, the Royal Police, and the Feyenoord fans.
Well, I've heard people singing it in the ground like over the last probably 3 or 4 seasons. I've heard Sheffield United fans singing it, but also Leeds and Sheffield Wednesday and Liverpool fans, I think, were the first to sing it. And it's really weird. I always fancied, you know, like getting a song on the terraces, you know, it's always a bit of an ambition. But I didn't think it would come so late. It was like weird how, like, it was like, again, 20, 30 years after the event, suddenly some bright spark in the pub has just gone, oh, we'll start singing this. So yeah, I was really pleased when I heard Liverpool fans and subsequently all the other fans singing it.
Well, we've got 2 ultra groups. We have the Green Brigade and a group called the Boys. So if they're listening, lads, you've done the Depeche Mode, you've done the Stone Roses. It's time to do Paul Heaton.
Yeah. I'm sure they've thought about me in the past, but now there's a time to say take it seriously.
Well, I have to say that there's always a big group of our crew when you do play in Glasgow or Dublin. Because we run a bus up, and the crack does be 90 on it. I'll always play a few tunes in the pub before it, and then we'll get our carry out and get on the bus. But I put it on Twitter that we had a couple of seats for that gig in Trinity College, and this person contacted me and says, we're okay for lift, but have you any tickets? And I said, no, I don't have any tickets. And Jacqui was obviously tagged in the Twitter. Right. And she came on and said, no, but I have. And she looked after the girl with the tickets. And that was standout quality.
Yeah.
Pop stars don't do that.
She's very good for that, is Jacqui. What she's exceptionally good for is last minute we get all the guest list on, and our manager's really stressed about it, and then, you know, with 5 minutes before doors open, she said, oh, I've forgotten somebody I was speaking to yesterday on Twitter, and they're bringing 10 people, and Tom, our manager's, oh my God, why didn't you tell me earlier? But yeah, I think people appreciate it. It's a nice touch. She's not been on Twitter for a while, but she's very good when she gets on there, very entertaining and communicative. People appreciate it.
Yeah, and I remember one night in the Olympia, a pal of mine, Dixie, had he 2 on the guest list, but he wasn't. He was walking in England, and as the bus was pulling up outside the Olympia, he messaged me and said, "I've got 2 on the guest list. I put you use my name. So I said okay. So I went in to make sure we were on the guest list. And I went out, and all the touts are outside. It's a sold out gig, like most of your gigs, Paul. But I'm not giving them to the touts because they're going to sell them at profit. So I went into the pub next door and I said, "Is anyone looking for tickets?" And everyone had tickets. So I couldn't even give your tickets away. And just as I walked out the door, a girl said to me, "Have you got anything? How much do you want?" I said, "No, anything." I says, "I'm after getting on the guest list." And I gave the girl the 2 tickets. Wow. And then we went in, and we were lucky enough, we got on the little bit in the front. If you're in, like, normally we go up early and queue up, Paul, so we can go into the bar, have a few points, and then you can get into the little bit in the front.
Right, yeah.
You know, because they've got your money. You've spent all your money in their bar. But that's probably, of all the venues I've seen you over the years, the Olympia Theatre is probably the best I've seen it. It's just such a fabulous gig venue.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've not watched anybody, in the event myself, but from stage, you can see everybody because it's really steep. So you've just got a line of people above each other looking at you, right on top of you, which is good. I don't mind. I used to be a lot more shy on stage than I am now. Now I'm a bit more philosophical about it. So I like to see people's faces now, whilst before it became a bit much for me, Was
that during your party days in the beautiful South?
Yeah. Well, I think with me, it's all back to sort of wanting to be an underdog, really, I suppose. I'm supporting the underdog. And when the Beautiful South sort of became the biggest band going, one of the biggest bands, it didn't fit in with the way I felt about myself. And so I felt as though I had to sort of go further back into myself. But yeah, I partied pretty hard in between the gigs and quite often on the night of a gig, especially in Ireland, to be honest. We used to put, again, if you looked over the concert, the way we put them together, we always put Dublin and Belfast at the end because it was just too much of a risk. And the one time we put them at the start, the tour was terrible. We started off, I can't remember, it was like Dublin, Belfast, and then the rest of the tour. And we were screwed by the third day. We were like, oh, God, we got another 10 of these. Whilst putting it at the end was a lot more sensible. But, yeah, good days. But, we were, pretty well behaved, really, considering we were drinking a load. We got on with everybody we met and sort of, just partied a bit too hard. I couldn't do it now.
Yeah, you mentioned there, when the band became so big, it didn't fit in with, Paul Heaton is. How does that, because I said to Peter when he was on, when fame, does it change it? And he says, well, it kind of has to, but it changes other people towards you. When you got that big, Paul, did you feel like I'm losing touch here with who I am?
Well, definitely the first time, yeah. I mean, the first time with the Housemartins, what the record company did is, because we were sort of, basically Sheep came out, got on the radio, we got a bit bigger because of that. Then Happy Hour came out, got on the radio, and then Think for a Minute, then Caravan of Love. So from about March to December, when Caravan of Love finished, they were adding on different dates to this tour, and it was just going on and on and on. And I got home on like December the 22nd or 23rd or something like that in 1986. I walked through the door and it was a house I'd bought on Grafton Street, the Grafton Street in Hull. And I thought, I've not even been in this house. And I looked in the mirror and all year, all I'd been called was Paul Heaton, out the Housemartins. And I looked into the mirror and just thought, you're not Paul anymore. You're not little Paul. You're Paul Heaton out the Housemartins. Everywhere you go, you're that person now to everybody else. So the first thing I did was, I got myself stuck into what I always did when I had problems, and that was just playing football. I rejoined my sides, had a few months off, and they were trying to persuade me to do this and that. My dad started talking to me about things, giving me advice, and I steadied that ship. Then formed the Beautiful South, thinking oh, it won't be as big. And that became even bigger and went on longer. But I had a little bit more control of that. You know, I felt as though we could be awkward if we wanted to be awkward. It was a bit of a longer thing and less hectic. And all we did with The Beautiful South, and that's what I do now, is I record an album every 2 years. It sounds like that's not very often, but you sort of spend half a year writing it and about 3 months recording it. And then the other 6 months is them packaging it all up and getting it ready for the shops. So really, I've sort of worked at that pace since The Beautiful South. I worked at the same pace. Go away to write, as soon as the album's finished, you know, as soon as the tour's over, I start work on the next one. And that's how I like it. So fame has become easier to handle, I think, but it's still something that can sneak up on you. And it does change other people's perceptions of you. I remember walking into my pub. I'd been in my pub, my local, years, you know, absolutely years. And I'd go in there after, you know, I'd been on Top of the Pops, and everybody was fine. You know, in fact, the pensions party was on. And when we were at number 1 with Cara and Everlove, I got a standing ovation from all the pensioners. They were so proud. They all had their copies of Flag Day from when that had come out, because I went in there. But then, you know, a couple of months later, a couple of people were saying, yeah, you think you're big, don't you? And I was like, well, not really, no. Yeah, but you think you are, don't you? I said, well, what do you want me to think I am? And they were like, big. We want you to think you're big. I goes, all right, I think I'm big then. And they were like, see? I said, I can't really win here, can I? And I had things like on the bus, you know, and this was when all the stuff out of the Sun was coming out. It's you, innit? You know, it's you. And I say, yeah, that's right. He goes, no, it ain't. I say, well, no, it isn't then. Because nobody is you, though, isn't it? It has to be you. I goes, yeah, it is me. And no, it isn't. Prove it. I said, I'm not proving who I am. I said, and then they'd say, if it was you, how come you're holding hands with your girlfriend? You're gay. It's been in the papers. It can't be you. I said, okay, then it's not me. And they said, but it is though, isn't it? And it would just go around in circles. And like, I think it was, people wouldn't expect to see you on a bus. People wouldn't expect to see you in your pub. What people wanted out of their money, their pop star, was me getting out of a limo in dark glasses with a security firm around me. And that's what they thought I should do. And when I didn't, that became a problem. But it became a problem sort of, I tried facing up to it, but it became a bit too much of a problem. People were coming, fans were coming from around the country and sitting in my local pub and putting my music on the jukebox and just staring at me. And after a while, I thought, this isn't really fair on the other people in the pub, you know, like for me to be the big attraction, you know, like. So it did change in a few ways, and I started hanging around with a few different people just because they took it in their stride. They didn't give a fuck about. Sorry, they didn't care who was being like this and who was being like that. And you know, I lost a couple of friends just because I suppose they either didn't like what I'd become, you know, and I mean. I don't mean an arsehole. I actually mean they didn't like me becoming famous, regardless of how I behaved. They didn't like the idea of that, which I wouldn't like it to happen to people I was close to. You know, it's not a very nice thing. It's good that they've been rewarded, but it's not very nice as a friend, as a close friend, to see everybody suddenly wants to speak to the person you've been close to. You know, it's a difficult situation for friends close to you to deal with, you know, on a practical level. You know, like I still have it now. People will come over and thank you very much for saying hello to my wife, because so many people come over and they're perfectly decent human beings and they totally cut my wife out of the conversation when I'm stood there, you know, even when I introduce her. And I'm talking from the pub to somebody who might be working for the record company. They just want to speak to me. And I've never been like that. And I always wanted, you know, well, this is my mate, or this is my wife, or, you know, these are my kids, or whatever. And the vast majority of people are very polite. But at the height of the Beautiful South, there was just a load of people who just wanted to speak to me because I'd been on Top of the Pops or whatever that week, you know. And if you're going to be polite to those people, which I like to be, it does it does. It's quite taxing for somebody close to you, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit spooky. Someone coming in and putting your song in the jukebox and staring at you.
Oh yeah, I was a master. I was an absolute master at disguising that. I became absolutely brilliant because I'd seen them out the corner of my eye. I could see them looking at me and then going over to the jukebox, and then they'd sit down and I would wait for it to come on, and I'd have all these, you know, and I'd just be talking or smoking or whatever I did at the time and drinking, and I wouldn't stop at all, you know. And even when they went to the bar stuff, and can you turn this up? And it was blaring out, and I still wouldn't stop talking. I had it off to, off to a T, non-reaction, you know, absolutely non-reaction. But there were some people who just, there was a bloke who was this kid from Leeds, and we just said, look, we don't mind you coming and sitting, but can you not ask questions about the band? Just sit with us if you want. If you want to hang around with Paul, sit there. Don't just asking questions about the band all the time. You know, we talk about this football, we talk about music. I don't spend a lot of time. I spend loads of time listening to music, but not talk about it myself. He couldn't sit there, and he was like like drumming the table with his fingers like that, and he just couldn't stop. He's like, that new single you've got out, and I was just saying, right, that's it, you go in, and they just locked him out the pub. But he lasted about 5 minutes without being able to. But yeah, so it became something. But I managed to keep going at my foot. A big credit to Hull, you know, where I was living during this time, was the fact I was able to play Saturday and Sunday football, you know, all the way through it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and nobody gave me. There was a bit of special attention. I got a couple of crunch tackles thrown in on me, and because I didn't back out, I got a good reputation locally as being somebody who just got stuck in and played football and wasn't above anybody or below anybody. So that was brilliant. But yeah, lots of funny stories about, you know, I mean, I could tell you loads of really stupid anecdotes. I lived on a street, you know, like a terrace street, and I still do here. Right? But when Caravan of Love got to number one, I'd get pissed up people, you know, like coming down my street and singing outside my house because they knew where I lived. And they would sing the whole of a song like Caravan of Love. They'd sing it from start to outside my house, and I'd just sit there patiently and wait for them to finish, and off they go. But I'd go over to the shop in the morning and say, see you were out there last night again. I said, what? I said, you singing your song in the street. I was like, that wasn't me. Sorry, one sec. There's something that's come up. Adobe Flash Player, sorry. Oh, God.
Just ignore it.
I can't see you.
Can you not see? I can see you.
All right, 1 second. I need to cancel that. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, so there was people accusing me of, you know, singing my own songs out in the street when it was just somebody annoying me. And I'd say it wasn't me. I said, well, it was you. Mind you, you were a bit out of tune. I said, of course I was out of tune. It wasn't me. But it would affect your behaviour. I became too scared to go to the jukebox in the Grafton, just in case one of my songs came on whilst I was over it. Do you know what I mean? So people would be saying, well, you've been putting your own songs on the jukebox. So little things I became very aware of not to do, and because that would be a nightmare, you know, like being caught, sort of. But anyway, yeah, it was all right. I much prefer it now, you know, by a long, long way, where I only really get recognised if you know, if I've been on telly that week or that morning, you know, it's not so bad now.
I'm just laughing because Caravan of Love, I used to finish my set with Enjoy Yourself by the Specials.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I DJ in a late bar. It holds about 70 people. It's in the front of a nightclub. So the nightclub is playing whatever nightclubs play. And it's called Alternative Saturdays. And
Right.
I just play my record collection or my CD collection. But I always played Enjoy Yourself by the Specials. And maybe you're wondering now, because I would have played the Housemartins, the Beautiful South, Paul Heaton during the night. And like it starts at 10 o'clock and finishes at, you know, the guts at 3 in the morning. So
Is this in Drogden?
Yeah, we probably have. It's a venue called the Cross. We probably have 3 or 4 different crowds. We've got the
Right,
people in first for the nightclub, then they go off. Then we've
right.
another crowd come in, and then we've the people who come at the end of the night because they can get a late drink, not because they like my music, but they can squeeze in for a late
Yeah,
drink.
yeah,
So, but someone said to me one night, play another Housemartins, a beautiful South song, because they don't actually say Paul Heaton. Only fans say Paul Heaton.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I go, okay, but at 3 in the morning, I'm well pissed because it's a night out for me as well. So I'm well drunk. So I think I put on Caravan of Love by mistake. You know,
Right.
it was on a CD and I stuck it in and
Yeah,
and the place went absolutely ballistic.
right.
And that has become my theme tune now when I'm finishing a gig, Paul. And if you could only see the drunk people, including the bar staff,
Yeah,
and bouncers have come in and enjoying themselves at
that's
almost 3 a.m. in the morning when there's 1,000 people behind us dancing to God knows what. And
yeah,
this little room is it's just brilliant. So I can
yeah.
thank you for that song. And
Yes.
I promise it wasn't me outside your house, but if I
No,
had
no.
passed, I probably would have sang with the other 70 people in the pub.
Yeah,
But anyway, right, back to football, Paul.
yeah,
Sheffield United is your team.
that's
But
right.
you also have a pre-ritual, which I'm going to get into, your gig ritual of visiting football stadiums. But first, Sheffield United, how are you treated on the terraces?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, yeah. I've been, yeah, fine. I know most of the older fans, you see, because probably, I don't know what division we were in 1985, 86, but we weren't a long way up, you know. So I became sort of in the charts when we were probably in Division 3, the old Division 3, Division 2, coming up that way. So a lot of people knew me either before I was famous or when I became famous in the early years, early months. So, yeah, no, I'm treated very well. There was a bit of an animosity after the Ched Evans thing, you know, where I resigned from a position at the club. But no, in general, very well. Yeah, I think I'm treated as a blade. That's what I want to be treated as.
Yeah, and as I said, you have a pre-gig ritual. You visit a football stadium. I think the last time we saw you in Glasgow, you'd visited Motherwell's ground, and
Yeah.
I think the last time in Dublin was Shamrock Rovers. Tell us a little bit about that ritual and when did it start?
It probably started when I stopped drinking, because otherwise I'd be in a pub. But yeah, if I work out the routes we're going, also I travel a lot with a kid called Dave Goddard, and because they're all boozing on the bus. I go in a car, you know, separately, and we just tootle along. And as soon as we pass a place like Drogda, we're like, come on then, let's go to the ground. In fact, I've been to the ground. Yeah, it's got that enormous stand, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, really big stand, and the rest of it's quite. Oh, that's how it was anyway.
We have a little stand, and the rest is we have seats now, but it was always we only ever had a small stand. The rest is
right.
just big terrace. And
Right.
it's we've a good. Just put it this way, we have a good surface, but you wouldn't think much of the sheds.
Yeah,
It's fallen down, you know, like most League
yeah.
of Ireland grounds.
I think you were just about to play Sunderland in a friendly when we passed through. It's probably about 2015 or something like that. So yeah, I try and I love geography. I love the geography of places. I love club shops, especially if, you know, obviously if you see somebody in the club, it's usually quiet when we go and we just say, is there any chance we can have a look at the pitch? Like the bloke from Arbroath took us onto the pitch and was talking to us about how he reckons it was the coldest ground in the country, and it really did look that way. And we're talking to the groundsman at Queen of the South, just talking about when the diggers dug up his surface and replaced it with, you know, the 3G. So yeah, to get into a conversation at a football ground and just ask a little bit about the club and how it's going and who the best players are or who's the youngest player. I've done that with my dad on a smaller basis since I was, you know, 5 or 6. If we went past the ground, even just a playground, you know, like where there was an amateur game going on, he'd stop and say, come on, let's have a look at this for 10 minutes, see if there's anybody any good, and it would just be like a Sunday league match or something like that. So I'm always used to stopping off somewhere, and every time I go past any pitch, and no matter how small, I always say, I bet there's been a good goal or two scored in those posts. Like when you look at the post, you can just tell they're like slightly wonky or a bit small or a bit big. And I just like put a little picture in my head. So when you go to somewhere like Shamrock Rovers, that's quite a big professional setup, but with a very friendly set of people. It's really nice. We went to Bohemians, and they were really friendly. I think the club secretary took us round and was talking about, she was a Man United fan as well. It's just nice to have conversations with people about football and about their attendances, and and they'll quite often say, well, you do know we had 20,000 here for the UEFA Cup match in 1976, and then you get home and look it up, and there's this fantastic crowd there. So it's an interesting football, but geography as well.
Yeah, of course.
Pictures everywhere of maps of different. I've got a big picture there of the map of Scotland with all the teams and where they are, and I like to know where the smaller clubs like Annan are and Dumbarton and what have you, and who their local, who do you hate, So Queen of the South obviously hates Stranraer, and Stranraer hate Queen of the South, do you know what I mean? And I like to, why do you hate them? Oh, they really start getting animated, like saying they're totally different, but you sort of know they're similar, But yeah, it's meeting people and hearing the story, and then you feel as though you're building up a bit of a knowledge of an area. It's the first thing I do when I go on holiday in Spain, with my kids, is I say, look, I'm going to have to go to the local ground at some point and just, see what it's like, and, see what the facilities are like. And I'll just spend half an hour there. Quite often it's short, or maybe I'll buy a paper and there's a junior match on the Saturday or something. But whatever, I've got to find out what it is about that area, that makes a place tick. And it's been fascinating. Me and Dave Rotherham used to do it. Dave wasn't really into football at first, but we used to go to see the side of Guinnigan. And we went there one time, and I said, Dave, that player, whoever it is, I said, he needs to be playing at Sheffield United. He said, what? Dave was like, what? Who? Him? And then Dave goes, bloody hell, yeah. He's amazing, he's amazing. And I was like, we are going to write down his name, and we are going to take him back to England, all that sort of crap. Anyway, years later, I still collect the football stickers like an idiot. Years later, about 96, I got the Spanish stickers. It was for the World Cup. So it must have been 94 or 98 or something like that. And I saw they used to give the birth dates, didn't it? Birthplace. Right down to the hospital. And I've seen Juan Pablo Valeron at Guinnigan. He's from again. I said, I rung Dave up. Dave, I think we found out who was in. And we worked it all the way back to a Guinnigan, and that player had been Juan Pablo Valeron. He looked exactly the same. He was playing in the match. And then I took an interest in that area. It was a very deprived part of Gran Canaria. It also produced David Silva, for Man City, and several other very good players who went on to Las Palmas, etc. So that sort of thing, where we got a taxi away from the touristy bit and went to this tiny little place called the Guinnigan. It feels as though it's like, I don't know, it's so fruitful. Sometimes it's not, but usually there's some little story comes out of it, or some interest, a further interest in the area,
And you mentioned the Canaries there, Paul. Is that where you used to record in Holland, didn't you? You used to write your albums in Holland.
Right. Yeah, I wrote the lyrics in Holland, still do, and the music in Gran Canaria, yeah.
And I don't know who you were doing the interview. Obviously you've played with, all these musicians over the years, different musicians of different standards. You write the music with your guitar player now. Yeah,
it's a bit more long-winded than that. So I go away and write the lyrics by myself, and to some of the lyrics, to remember the So remember the meter of it, the rhythm of it, I write the tune in my head. If the tune's worth keeping, that's it, it's kept. I've written the whole thing. That includes bridge, verse, chorus, the whole thing. So I'd say about 1 in every 3 are like that. I've got the whole thing in my head and I just explain it to the guitarist. And the other 2 or 3, the guitarist comes up with an idea and I try singing a melody on top of his idea. So yeah, it's written a few different ways, but originally I used to go to Holland because I was by myself and I just used to go over on the ferry from Hull. And it used to be very cold in Holland. I'd go in the winter, and then in the summer we'd go away, me and Dave Rotherley, and go on a sort of like a package holiday really to Gran Canaria, have a laugh. And the 2 things everybody used to say are, why are the lyrics so miserable and why are the songs and tunes so melodic and happy sounding? That was really my reason, not just the winter in Holland and the summer in Gran Canaria, but also being by yourself to having a laugh with Dave Rotherley. Do you know what I mean? It was a big difference. I was in a really sort of, when I used to go away to Holland by myself, it was really, I used to get into a real sort of drinking a lot, but also quite a depressive state and write all these lyrics. And then in the summer going away with him, we'd just be laughing all the time and the sun would be outside and and I can understand why it was more, melodic than and more fun than the lyric writing by myself.
Yeah, because from that interview, I remember you saying something, and like, you correct me if I'm wrong, that he played it in like pub bands, so he played loads of different genres of music. Am I close?
No, that's probably Johnny. That's probably Johnny more than anything. Johnny, who I write with, who I've written since 2014.
Yeah. That's and the reason why I bring it up is because Ronan, the producer of the podcast, is a musician, and he plays and he does a solo in the pub, and then he has a band that does weddings and gigs and whatever. And I was telling him, I was listening to an interview, and he was going, "See, I told you." He says, "You can learn." He says, He says, pub musicians, they know every tune, they know everything," and he was delighted. So I'm just getting that fact out, so he'll be happy now when he hears the interview.
I think he's right. I think also Ireland, and this is one way we are connected, without a doubt. Britain and Ireland is Ireland and Britain are just full of musicians. Like I've got a lot of friends in Germany, and I've known them for a long time, 40 years actually. Next month, I've known them. I've been going to visit them, and they just come to England and they just say everybody's in a band. And when they go to the island, it's the same. They see people playing in the pubs, they see people playing on the streets, busking, and they just think that the British Isles and Ireland are just full of musicians, and they sort of are. I mean, when I'm round here, right? Yes, the other day somebody come round to do the electrics, right? And straight away, I used to be a bassist in a band a few years ago, and there is so many people who join bands after school or during school, and there's people who play in pubs for the whole of their lives quite happily. And yeah, your mate's right. It is a really good way. A good way of learning an instrument is actually playing other people's songs, because they're playing in all these different styles to how you'd naturally play anyway. So Johnny, I can just throw any genre at him and just say, look, I want this a bit more bluesy or punky or whatever, and he can do it, which is great for me.
And early in the career, Paul, like I would always have thought, there was gospel influence, there was soul influence.
Yeah.
But I suppose from DIY, there's a country influence there as well. So you're influenced by loads of music.
Yeah, I mean, the Beautiful South were influenced by country music. Old Red Eyes, if you strip it down, is really a country song. A Little Time is quite countrified, Brenna's voice on it. So yeah, we've always had a few different influences. I think at the start of the Housemartins, probably I'd been listening to Al Green and Bill Withers and, like soul singers like that, the softer soul singers. So that was a big influence for me as well. But yeah, I think, there's all sorts of influences creep in. Not massive ones. I think we still play pop, but, you can hear what I've been listening to recently, usually.
Well, there's like when I said earlier on about the vast array, like some, like, do you know how many hits you've wrote, or how many albums you've recorded, or how many singles you've released? Because I wouldn't have them all, but I have most of them, and like it's a lot.
Yeah. It's about. I know how many albums it is. It's like 20, I think, and it's a few hundred songs that I've written. So it's a lot. It's a challenge not to repeat what you've written already, but just occasionally I think, oh, that sounds like something, and it gets more difficult to remember as you get older. But in general, I never struggle to. I certainly won't struggle for lyrics, because I'm so opinionated, and I describe it as bitchy, but it's probably the wrong word. But whenever I see somebody, I can write a song about them, if you see what I mean. If I look at a bus queue, I can see things going on on there. I don't want people to think I look at people and just write songs all the time, but I see a lot of stories in people, the way people walk, or the shopping they're carrying, or do you know what I mean? I think I like hidden things in normality, and because I'm writing about fairly normal people are the most complicated, aren't they? I think.
Yeah, like some of your songs, like from like early stuff, like "Woman in the Wall." You mentioned All Red Eyes there. We can relate to them because where we live, in the council estates we grew up in, and where we live now, and our mates and their fathers or their grandfathers or something, we see people in them songs. Like, like they're not, like there's, how do I put it? We can relate lyrically with them, and like I'm always surprised about some of the people that would be at a Beautiful South or a Paul Heaton gig, because I'm saying they definitely like the music, but they don't look like they know what he's singing about, because you were on the Late Late Show with Ryan Tubridy. I'm sure you've been on it a couple of times. Now that's a massive show in Ireland. That's from when I was a kid, from Gay Bones time right up. And I seen him at the gig at Trinity College, and he just looked like a fish out of water, like, he just, with his blazer and his little, and he just, like, it was, and that was one of the moments when I said, he loves the tunes, but he definitely doesn't know what they're singing about.
That never mattered to me, you see, weirdly enough. I know it should do, but it never did, because I thought, well, if people don't know what I'm singing about, it's up to them to come to the lyrics if they want to, or because there's a lot of music. There's some music I listen to and I think the lyrics are important here, but some of it I listen to the tune first, and I'll quite happily listen to the tune and never really find out what the song is about. I sort of probably guess it's not that interesting, but I just listen to it purely on a musical way. And that was one of the big privileges I thought we had, is people used to say, oh yeah, but people don't understand what you're talking about. I say, I'm not bothered. It doesn't. What I think is, as long as some of the audience understand, some of them can be there just because they like the tune. We don't get anybody there just because they like the look of us. That's for sure. Maybe a couple of Jacqui, but in general, we never did. Because don't forget, a lot of these people who go to say one of the boy bands ones, they will like, one of the things about seeing their band would be to actually look at them and think they're lovely looking lads, and they're singing like angels, etc. We never had that, but we did have people who really looked at the lyrics and thought, yeah, that's about me, or that's about that person next door, or whatever. And a load of people just didn't appear that interested, just loved the tunes. And I think that was a plus, really, that we could get them both in the same room, and maybe by a song like Heaton it suddenly clicked. Hang on a second, and at least you've got them as a fan already. And the same with me politics, really. People know what I stand for, but they don't want to hear it every day. Do you know what I mean? They don't want to hear me giving my opinion here, left, right, and centre. They just know, I'm out there on the left,
Well, We want to hear your politics, Paul. We want to hear, you can come on the
cool,
pod. We'll do a daily
yeah,
podcast. Paul's 15 minutes.
yeah.
Paul, just back to football. Italian football. Are you a bit of an expert on it?
I was, I mean, over a decade or so, I was. I tend to spread it more thinly now. I know quite a bit about Dutch football at the moment. I sort of go around Europe, sort of holding an interest. But modern Italian football, I know very little about. I think the game in Italy has suffered a little bit through lack of money, as it has in lots of different places, But yeah, I did know a lot between, say, the season 87, 88 to 97, 98. I knew most of the players and the tactics, the managers, the grounds, etc. The supporters, the different supporters groups, and yeah, I knew quite a bit.
Yeah, because I met one of the lads yesterday, and he said, "Who's next in the podcast?" And I says, hopefully Paul Heaton. I says, but I don't know him personally, so he may not. He may pull out, And he was going. He said, "Make sure you ask me about Italian football." He said he used to know a lot about Italian football. So there you go. There you go, Kieran. I've asked.
Well, that came also from I'm a absolute I don't know what you'd call it, attackophobe. I don't like Italian attacking football much. I don't like. I don't know if you know much about Bielsification. Bielsification is what's happened in places where Marcelo Bielsa's gone, and the game's got quicker and quicker and quicker, and also teams that are influenced by Bielsa, or managers, like Klopp, etc., Guardiola, have got the game going faster and faster and faster. And I cannot watch some Premier League matches now. I just cannot watch them because, and this isn't sort of like sour grapes. This is when I just watch a game like Liverpool Villa, or I think the Liverpool Leeds match. It's just like watching pinball to me. It is just so fast and so ridiculous that I was one of the first people who said Liverpool this season are going to be absolutely spent because they're playing an intensity that isn't survivable. And that's what's happened traditionally to Bielsa's teams and teams who have gone along that process of quickening the game and quickening the... If you look, Trent Arnold at Liverpool, I know he's had a couple of games recently, but there was a period during mid to latter season where he looked like a spent force. And it wasn't physically, it was mentally, he looked drained as well. And I think he's correctly taken a bit of time off England. It was good that England gave him a rest or dropped him, or however you want to look at it. And I think now there's the chance that he'll get a little bit of a spring back in his step. But so the delight for me on the pitch playing, and I only played to sort of top flight amateur. I never played semi-pro. Played top flight amateur, Yorkshire County and stuff like that. It was my delight was purely spoiling it for good attacking players. I loved stopping them in their tracks. I loved sliding in and taking the ball and their legs away from them. Not in a dirty way. I loved them diving against me as well. If there's anybody doing a bit of play act, I don't like play acting, but I like diving. And the distinguish between play acting and diving is somebody diving. If they were good at it, I would congratulate them. Look, that's fantastic, mate. If they were bad at it, I'd just say, look, you're wasting your time. But play acting, I didn't like. Rolling round and screaming, etc., etc. But diving, no problem. So to me, when I watched the Italians, when I watched Baresi and Bergomi, etc., etc., and then when I went to watch them in 2000, and it was Nesta and Cannavaro, it was just incredible to watch these players. And at the time, in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, Italy had three stranieri, three foreigners, and they would pick inevitably the best three strikers for each side in the world. But they would be up against Italian defenders, and that was just, so it would be Van Basten and Hullet against Ferri and Carnevali, or Viercavod at Sampdoria. So there would be this fantastic collision, almost collision of societies. Like the Italians very, very rarely sell one of their defenders. You very rarely see them leave their league. And so you would get, especially at the time they would never leave the league, you would get these colossus defenders against the best attackers in the world. And it made, it made for, I love that sort of football. I love to see a close game, a close 1-0 game or a 0-0 game or a 1-1. Doesn't matter. I like to see a game. What I don't like to say is players being rushed and pressed. And the higher press is getting higher as players get fitter, which they will do, fitter and fitter. Your press is getting tighter, and the amount of room you have to play the game is getting smaller, and that worries me.
Yeah, that's the last time we had someone on talking about Italian football was we had Mimo Rossi on, he has an Italian restaurant in Glasgow, but he grew up in Naples, and when Maradona died, we got a fan on to talk about him, and that was the last time. And he said that when Maradona came to Italy, he changed, what he done for Napoli in that league.
Yeah.
To take them from nowhere to champions, and he just said, like, one man, this is one man. We're talking about all these defenders and that, but Maradona could orchestrate any defense.
Yeah. I said before, by the way, I said Ferri and Carnevale. I meant Ferri and Mandolini, who were the centre-backs at Inter, but Carnevale was instrumental in that Maradona side. And yeah, Maradona was one of the few players I've seen live a couple of times who could sort of strike fear into a stadium like the San Siro. The whole ground would be, oh yeah, you have to see it to believe it. They hated him. They hated him because he was the one player who could destroy an Italian defence single-handedly, which was incredible to watch. Absolutely amazing to watch. So yeah, it was a great period for the sport, in my opinion. And different leagues have different times, don't they? And different eras when they're fantastic. And you'd have to say the English Premier League is going through, certainly with the club football, is going through a really positive stage at the moment. But as I said, there's a real danger with the game getting too quick for me.
Yeah, like you say there about different countries having their time. I look into there's no doubt there's going to be a European Super League of something, because money's going to dictate that, and they want all the big clubs to play each other. And I look at Celtic and like, well, apart from this season, but we're either the best or the second best in Scotland in many years since we kind of had it. We'd barren years in the 90s, but since we came back, we've been there or thereabouts. But when we go into Europe, when we play, and it doesn't feel that long ago that when we were playing under Martin O'Neill in Europe, we were competing with the Juventuses. We were competing, we could beat any of the big teams on our day. But now, like under Brendan Rodgers, we were getting whipped by Barcelona, whipped by PSG. We gave good results against Man City. Yeah. But the gap now, and we're a big club, Paul, but the gap is massive. Both financially and as player-wise. So if the Italian football is going to come back, it'll be a couple of clubs, and it'll be through this new Champions League or whatever they're going to do. And that's what's great, because you're talking amateur football, Italian football. You've a wonderful knowledge of the game.
Yeah, well, I spend a long time looking at it. I write down different players. Nearly every day I'm looking at, League Two and League One players, and Eerste Divisie, which is the second division in Holland. I look at players, Volendam and stuff like that. And so I spend a long time. and I've got 3 daughters. So although they like football, I can't bore them as long as I'd like to about football. They've got other interests other than football. But the first thing I did with all of them was take them to the local. Nearest to us is probably Man United. So I took them to Stockport because, Man United is quite difficult to get tickets for. So I took them to Stockport, and we went to Bury and Rochdale and stuff like that. And so we watched Stockport for a bit, and then Stockport went down all the divisions, and now I've taken to Sheffield United, but then we're starting to go down the divisions, so we'll see. We'll see about that.
Yeah, well, like football and music, Paul, to me, you know, it's a marriage made in heaven, and especially like when you announce your tours, you know, we check the fixtures to see we've got Belfast, Dublin, or Glasgow, and sometimes we can get all three, and there's a group of us go. But like as I said, look at the fixtures, and I think the last gig in Glasgow was Friday night. We're playing Saturday, and we're going, you know, 4:20 flight, you know, or we can get the 2:30 flight. So we're on the flight in the hotel bar before the gig, and you know, all our mates from Glasgow come in. So like, there's a community. There's a few Rovers boys there, because there is a few little groups of football fans from different clubs that follow Celtic as well, and they've all come because the gig is on as well. Take the gig in, take the match in. You know, it's a perfect weekend. You know, a couple of beers, and like, people say, "Oh, you know, how can you be bothered getting up at that time?" Because we used to run a bus to Glasgow, getting up at that time in the morning and coming back, and it's brilliant, you know, because we're not just getting on a bus and not talking or not listening to music or not having the crack or not having a few beers. It's just, and I think, although the game has, you know, at the high ends has changed completely, and the money that's in it, but it's still the sport of the working class, Paul. It still is.
Yeah. Well, I think like several seasons ago, and it's happened in the past, people have said, "Oh yeah, you must want to get up into the Premiership," and I've always said, "No, I don't." Right? And I'm not just saying it this season, but I've said it for a long time. And the reason is a few reasons, really. One, I don't particularly like going to places, with all due respect, say Arsenal away, brand new stadium, can't really get much atmosphere. And I'm saying that as somebody who enjoyed the atmosphere, other Arsenal, you know, games and grounds, etc. Same with West Ham. I went to the old ground. Millwall, I went to the old ground. So I've been to these grounds, but now those teams are in the, you know, big league and got new stadiums. I think a lot of the atmosphere is drained out. So somebody was arguing with me last night. Well, not arguing, but, you know, said to me, as a Leeds fan, you know, saying, "Oh, you know, are you going to, you're looking forward to playing Peterborough away and then going down to League One?" I said, yeah, I actually am. The only time I've been to London Road, isn't it, Peterborough? It was snowed off, and I got all the way to Peterborough. So yes, I am. I take delight in going to a place like Peterborough, finding out a bit, going a bit early, you know, going to the club shop, getting something stupid like a lighter, or, you know, like just, yeah, I'd rather do that than be ferried around by the police everywhere. So I think all the leagues below, I don't think you've got the problem in Scotland there, because there's always new teams coming up, you know, or going down. You know, you might be gaining Hearts but losing Hibs, or you'll gain, lose Dundee and gain Dundee United and Motherwell and Livingstone, etc., etc. There's these smaller grounds to go to. The only time I've been to see Celtic was away at Partick Thistle. And I loved that ground. You know,
that's the big Glasgow derby. That's the historical Glasgow derby, because unfortunately the other team died across the city. Now they've come back as a new team, and in 9 years they've been doing quite well, Paul. But you know, maths isn't a strong point, because you know they think 1 = 55. But look, we won't go into that with you.
But you know what I mean, is that's not a part of Glasgow that I would normally go to, and yet, you know, I've come to Glasgow 20, 30 times, and then I've gone to a Partick Thistle match, and then suddenly you see a different part of Glasgow, you know, like, so going to all sorts of grounds instead of just the posh ones and the big ones gives you a part of the cities and the part of the country that you don't normally go to. And so, yeah, obviously, I'll be happy to see Sheffield United, whatever league they played in, you know, like, I love them. I love them as a club. It doesn't matter to me what size the ground is. It's a bit of a disadvantage when the ground is full and it's full of people who don't normally support you. You know, you don't have that at Celtic, because Celtic have got a massive support. You don't get people suddenly starting liking Celtic just because they're near the top of the league or whatever. So yeah, it's it's a season I look forward to. I think relegation is a bit like when you turn another birthday, and like you think it's coming, like, oh God, I'm going to be 50. And then once you're 50, you're thinking, it's all right, isn't it? So you get the new fixtures out and everybody's laughing because you're playing Wickham. And then you think, actually, hang on, I think I'd rather go to Wickham and have a laugh and go to the pubs near the ground than I would go to Anfield and get stuffed 4-0. And suddenly you start thinking, your expectations change, don't they? So, yeah, we'll see.
Well, it has been a tough season for Sheffield United, and but it's funny. It's been even tougher for us, or Celtic, and we finished second. It's
all relative, isn't it? With you, I mean, I don't think it would have been as tough a season if Aberdeen had been running away with it. I think the fact that the other team have won the league, and they've done it well. I have to say, they've got some great. I love Ryan Kent. There's a few players I like that come up through, and Gerrard's getting them to play good football. But I think Lennon was never going to survive Rangers winning the league. Not a chance. I don't think there's many Celtic managers who would survive that. No. Certainly not for longer than one season.
Yeah, no, it was just such a historic season this year as well. And I can't give them any credit because I just can't, right? And
I don't expect you to.
But they've won, and if we had won, we'd be giving them pelters. So we'll just have to get over it. But we had a great run, Paul. I was talking to a guy in the podcast last week, Jacqui Abbot. He lives in Canada now, and Jacqui had seen the first 9 in a row.
Yeah,
and he'd been to a European final,
right?
And when I started following Celtic in the late 80s, they were good, and then we had all them barren years in the 90s.
Yeah.
And when we won one cup, up from 89 to 95, we won the cup, and then we didn't win the league till 98 when we stopped Rangers doing 10 in a row. But I can't believe when I think back then that I've witnessed 9 in a row, and I've been to a European final, because it's kind of dream stuff. When as a fan, and nothing beats, Paul, a European away day, and like you say, go to these grounds. I remember going to Tbilisi in the Czech Republic. I'd never heard of it, and you go to this ground and it's snowing, and again it's an old stadium, and it's just magic, And then I speak to some of the older boys that went, to East Europe for games before communism fell, and stories they have of these grounds, and just unbelievable. The way days are just fantastic.
It's geography and history. I think one of the reasons I'm not prejudiced is the first thing, I'm not bothered about the colour of somebody's skin or their religion or whatever. Wherever I go, I ask them, if they like football. And I talk to them about football. What's your side, and who do you hate, and et cetera, et cetera. And this applies to, when you go to Turkey or Bulgaria or wherever I've been. And if they don't like football, I'll try talking to them about some sport connected. And I think to travel, as we know after this last year, is one of the great privileges of the modern world. And to travel and watch the football team you love, and with a group of lads and lasses you're keen on, is an even greater privilege. But I'm weirdly enough, I like going to Europe on holiday. I don't go too far, and I don't go out of Europe. But I prefer just travelling England, watching the Blades. I'm not sure if I'd like to go away in Europe with Sheffield United. I think it can be any England side who qualified for Europe. There can be a undercurrent of people who turn out on the day, causing trouble, even at clubs where I think the fans are well behaved, like Liverpool. They've had a couple of incidents where people have come along and done this and done that. So, I'm quite happy going to Peterborough next season or whoever it is.
Yeah, well, I like to behave myself, Paul, because especially in Istanbul when we played Fenerbahce.
Yeah.
That was a stadium I always wanted to go to. I always wanted it, and it was absolutely brilliant. They'd have been 3 groups of ultras. The noise they created, one would stop singing, one would start. And I was told all these bad things about it, and I've nothing but good things to say about Istanbul and people and how we were looked after. So, until you experience it yourself, you can't. Your opinion can change. But anyway, Paul, right?
Yeah,
I said on the intro that you've never hidden behind the door with your views. Even though you're in the spotlight, you're always honest, and you've stayed true to your values, and fame and fortune hasn't changed you. You play benefit gigs, and you've also been known to put your hand in your own pocket to pay off workers who've lost their jobs. But you didn't. You don't put this out in the public domain. It's other people, and I see similarities between Paul Heaton and Celtic, because our founding father, Brother Walford, he formed the club to feed the poor in the East End of Glasgow, and you continue to help people who maybe are not as well off as you.
Yeah, well, I try. I don't know much about the history of Celtic, and I have no idea of the person you're comparing me to. But I mean, particularly at the moment, you spend a lot of time. I don't live in a community separate from anybody else, if you see what I mean. I don't live. I've got a backyard, not a back garden. Although I do have enough room for sunflowers and stuff like that. So I don't live in luxury, and so I don't separate myself from society's problems, and therefore I feel as though I'm overpaid. As you know, I should say I'm in a situation where, as a worker, I get paid much more than other workers get, because I'm still the worker in the relationship with the with the record company. So any chance I have, or any time I see anything going on locally or nationally that I think needs a bit of help, I do try and help out with it. But I do try and keep it quiet when I can. So I get embarrassed about talking about it too much. But yeah, I think it feels quite natural to me. I think as soon as there was a situation. There's been a few situations in the past with Beautiful South and with Housemartins and things like that, where we've had people come in and say, "Oh, you should do this with your money. You should do that with the money." And I was also and I would admit that, yes, we talked earlier, fame did affect me. But one thing I was really, really determined not to do, or not to let happen, is let money affect me. Because when you start behaving, when money starts controlling you, that gets to me a really dangerous point, because it can affect your attitude towards everything and everybody. You can build a bigger house and put your walls further higher, and remove yourself. I want a bigger car so you're above everybody on the road. If you let money control you, that's the danger. And that's, I think, what my dad taught me more than anything. He said to me at the start of the Housemartins, when they started becoming famous, he said, what they'll do, and everything he said in that conversation was absolutely true. He said, what they'll do is, after this hit, they'll try and say, we need to add more dates. I said, Dad, I need to go home. He said, yeah, you do need to go home. And when you say you need to go home, they'll offer you more money for the dates. Turn down the money and say you got to get home. So I turned down the money. He said, yeah, if you turn down the money and say you got to go home, what they'll do is they'll offer you a driver or a helicopter to get you back in time for football Saturday morning. And what they'll do is your time at home is bought until it goes down and down and down. And you can sell that last weekend for £20,000, but you've lost all the other weekends and the rest of the calendar because you've sold yourself off. And he said, don't let that happen. As soon as they start saying, we'll buy your time off you, that's time to put your foot down. And he wasn't a particularly wise man. He was a clever man, but everything he said was true. They tried to say, and that gave me the argument against the record company. I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to take my time. I'll have a couple of months off. I need to do this. I need to write the lyrics, not months off, but, to write the lyrics and if you want a good second album. So I did. I sat at home and I wrote Build and Me and the Farmer and all that sort of stuff. and then we had a breather and went ready to go again. But it was right, and that's what I think is the most controlling factor above fame is money. You know, for me, because I'm like Pete Heaton, and again, you'll have to excuse me for this anecdote, but we're both discovered by John Peel, right? And what you did as a John Peel band is me and Pete, quite separately, formed a band saying, oh, come on, let's learn some instruments. And the short-term goal was to get a gig. And then after that, if you got a gig, hey, maybe we could get 2 gigs. And then, you know what, a little mini tour. And guess what? I've got a mate, his mate, Carl Hunter. He can make some cassettes up and we'll sell the cassettes on the tour. And you never guess what? We might then have enough money to make a proper recording. And you never guess what? After that, we might have a chance to get on telly. And guess what? After that, you'll never guess we might actually be on telly and people will recognise that. And guess what? We might actually become famous, right? That was right at the end of the process. But nobody really got as far as talking to that. The opposite is true of people these days. They start off, I want to be famous, right? And then they say, oh yeah, we're going to have to make you a video. And then we're going to have to write you some songs. And then you're going to have to do some gigs. And then they work all the way back to, actually, I need to learn an instrument because I haven't got any contribution to anything. So we came from that thing where we didn't want to be famous. We just formed a band to sort of get on John Peel, maybe at the very most. That was and so the hundreds of bands came from that thing where money wasn't the motivator and neither was fame. So that's where I still feel now. I feel as though I'm a songwriter, and I only ever wanted to become professional, but I wanted to become professional for all my life. When the Housemartins got signed by Go Discs, the biggest thing in our contract, and they were saying, why don't you want an advance of 150,000? I said, I've just been on the dole for 2 years. Do you know what I mean? I don't want a load of money. I want a wage. And they put all of us on a wage. And that wage lasted for 4 years. And that's what we wanted. We wanted to be paid professionally. That was a big ambition and a great achievement for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, Paul, with all the technology we have, like this instant fame, created by the likes of Big Brother and like all these kind of celebrity programs where good-looking people with fit bodies go on them and they become famous. I was speaking to a young lad, and he was picked up the fanzine. One of my son's mates, and he picked up the fanzine. And he's flicking through it, and I said, "You like that?" He says, "I said, do you read?" And he says, "Not really, no, just social media." And I was telling him about fanzines and how I got involved with them in the 80s, and so forth. And I said it was great. I said because we never would have had an opportunity to write, and all of a sudden we could produce our own stuff. And the bands that I grew up with produced their demo tapes, and we hired venues and we had gigs and whatever. Yeah. But now it seems to be, if you have X amount of followers and X amount of likes on social media, that's judged by young people as, because I hear my son saying, did you hear about this boxer? And I'd never heard of him, and I'm a big boxing fan, but he's actually a YouTube boxer. He's become famous on YouTube.
Right.
So he has people paying huge money to watch him boxing on YouTube, but he's basically an amateur boxer because he boxes another YouTube celebrity. And I just couldn't get my head around this, Paul. And I'm kind of going, fuck, is this the end game now for like there's kids going to school now and they like, what would you like to be? I would like to be famous.
Yeah.
And it's like, as you say, you started here and you've done it in sections to get like, selling your tapes and getting a record deal and all that, and now, do you feel that like it's kind of gone a bit tits up because of this instant fame?
Yeah, it has. I think it's dangerous as well because what they're promising is fame without any substance. So you do get suicides, and you get terrible examples of people starving themselves to death. And it's a very extreme. They're putting this bubble straight away. We worked our way to get into the bubble. I'm not saying you have to. I've got no. I don't think you have to go around and play all the gigs I played or do all the travelling in the back of a shitty van. You don't have to do that. But what I do think they're doing is putting people straight in the bubble. People who are perhaps eight to 6 years younger than I was. I was 24 when Happy Hour got in the charts. So they're putting 18-year-olds in there, straight in, and the first thing they've seen is the television cameras. They come out and they're famous, and they've got no body of work at all. And this is the same with a lot of the boy bands. And so what happens with people like that is they suddenly cover themselves in tattoos. I don't know if you noticed it. Because they don't feel real. They get a tattoo and they'll start wearing a leather jacket or get photographed on a motorbike. Or, do you know what I mean? And it's all, so, oh yeah, so-and-so, he's really serious now. And what it is, I see it as a cry for help. I see them, you know, that, oh yeah, I've seen him recently, he's got a guitar, he's a real serious musician. And I just think this is a massive cry for help. You're covering yourself with tattoos and getting a leather jacket because you're having a midlife crisis at the age of 21. Because you feel as though unless you get these Instagram likes and this buzz back, it can become incredibly lonely. You sort of become a one-hit wonder, but by yourself. You know, if the Housemartins had just had Happy Hour, we could have dealt with it as, you know, there was four lads, and we would have carried on touring for a few years or whatever, you know, and that would have been that. But this is one person by themselves, come out by themselves, and suddenly, you know, they're all over the newspapers. And for what? You know, I'm not anti the programmes. My kids, you know, they watch Love Island and all that stuff. You know, I don't stop and watch it. I know I can see you rolling your eyes there. Don't worry, I am the master of eye rolling. I've got a degree in it. And when I go in there and I see them all pumped up and posing by the pool, don't think I say, this looks really interesting. What is it? I just roll the eyes and I'm out of the room and let them do what they want to do. And that's just the way they've been brought up. They just went to the local school and they do the things that other kids do. It is incredibly, obviously a bit depressing, but it's incredibly dangerous, you know, following that as your guide, you know, like trying to think, well, I want to be famous. That's not a statement that should ever come out of anybody's mouth, in my opinion. Not if you're stable. If you're stable, you could say, I want to be famous for, you know, I want to be famous for dancing, or I want to be a famous singer. I don't mind them saying that. Or I want to be a famous chess player, or, you know, like, you know, I want to be on television. I want to be the psychiatrist who deals with people's you know, there's no problem with wanting to be the best or the most famous at what you're doing, but just to say I want to be famous is so vacuous, isn't it? It's just a bubble waiting to be popped. So as much as people of my age and younger people like yourself argue against it, it's there. What I think they have to do is facilitate for the dangers of it and make sure these people are looked after. If that's what you want to watch, and these are the people you're going to turn into superstars, make sure there's there's proper. I think people have got a little bit better now, haven't they, for facilitating for people's mental health as they come out of these things. But I still do think there's always going to be problems involved in pure fame, you know, like just fame for fame's sake.
Yeah, and I just see it's either today or yesterday in one of the newspapers a young girl that had been one of the Big Brothers contestants. Yeah. She's 34, and she's passed away. I think she had I'm not 100% sure. She may have had an eating disorder or something. But there's a girl that has, you know, had this instant fame, and at 34, the poor girl, you know, has passed away, and that kind of get you thinking about, I don't know, you know, like. Maybe I'm just a little bit jealous when I see these lads with the six-pack stomachs because I'm heading for 50 and I'm overweight. And, you know, maybe I'm just a bit jealous that I can't go back. But I think if I did go back, Paul, I'd probably prefer to be at a Housemartins gig than watching Love Island, because my teenage years were absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
We done a pre-match show. I used to do a live thing in a pub before Celtic games when we could travel. And it was called Celtic AM. And it was basically, we got an ex-player maybe, or someone who wrote a book, or a musician, and they would come in and do 15-minute interviews each, tell the story. We'd have a bit of music, a few points, and then we go to the game. But I hadn't done it in a year because of the lockdown, so I decided I'd do a virtual one. And because I had no audience, I asked a couple of pals that go to games from different parts. I said, look, can you just give me a 30-second video of your favourite Scottish Cup moment? Just so we have some audience participation. And everybody sent us stuff in. But one of the things, Paul, that came out was from lads of a certain age and girls of a certain age was the 1988 Scottish Cup final. And that was our centenary season. And on that day, Celtic fans gave Maggie Thatcher the red card because Maggie was the guest of honour. And this was the highlight. They didn't talk about, they might have mentioned Frank McAvenny's goals, but this was the highlight for a lot of the fans that day. Now, you've never, as I said, hidden behind the door. And you have always been critical of the likes of Maggie Thatcher. And so, to see all these football fans giving her a red card, it's a great sight.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I've been critical of most governments we've had since Thatcher. In fact, I didn't vote for Blair, not first time either. I could see right through that slippery little shit. But obviously, we've got Johnson now and Cameron before him. All the stuff today's come out about Cameron. But yeah, excellent. They call it choreografia in Italy, don't they? Excellent choreography to give her the red card. I think at the time, most of the northern sides in England would have done something similar. I would hope. There used to be a lot of anti-Tory resentment in the north, especially, as I say, around the miners' strike. Sheffield United fans still sing, scabs to Forest fans. There was a lot of politics, a bit of right-wing politics, a bit of left-wing politics, but nothing like what Celtic did. Who were you playing that day?
We played Dundee United in the final that day.
Right, yeah.
Kevin Gallagher scored, whose father was, or grandfather was a famous Celtic player. But we've got two ultra groups, as I said, with the boys in the Green Brigade and the quite left wing, and they get hammered whenever they bring out anything political or anything Irish. And when they've done the Palestinian display, solidarity, when we played Beersheba, all of a sudden, it's not okay to be to have politics involved in sport, but we raised money and we gave it to Palestinian charities, and Pink Floyd used that as the backdrop of the concerts, or one of the Roger from Pink Floyd. But since then, the powers that be in FIFA and UEFA have come out and backed the Black Lives Movement. So all of a sudden, it's okay for politics to be involved in football when it suits them, Paul. But when it's a group of ultras or a group of fans showing that they don't want to be they don't agree with something, or they want to support something that may not be, to the Sun's likings or the Daily Record's liking, there's a campaign built against them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're incredibly hypocritical. I mean, this weekend it's been kick racism back into football, isn't it? A minute silence for Duke of Edinburgh. That's all I thought when I seen that sign. All these people saying the game's gone. I was just looking at them lot. That's the game gone, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's silence for him. What's he got to do with football? Nothing. But anyway, football's become a minute silence. I mean, they're only going to have about 10 minutes each way these days. Anybody who drops off, anybody connected to any club, there's a minute silence. So I don't understand that. But I was particularly upset with the reaction you got for what can only be described as a bit of political banter when you put the Mussolini thing up. I thought that was brilliant. There's nothing. There was. It's just a bit of playful prodding, isn't it? That's all. But I think if they're going to come through the streets of Glasgow, Sieg Highland, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How else are a group of left-wing supporters supposed to react to that? What a perfect way. I mean, apart from, the physical attacks that could or should take place having Nazis in your street. But what if you're not going to be violent, what better way to stick it to them? I didn't see the problem with that at all. In fact, the biggest surprise to me was that anybody from FIFA or UEFA even got it. Do you know what I mean? They're that slow and that stupid. that I'm amazed they got it. But I think
it's funny, Paul, when you say, like, when you get fans marching through streets, and we've played a couple of clubs that, we play one quite regularly, that would have a far right wing element, and like, I always remember I was going over to see Celtic play Parma in a friendly, pre-season friendly, and I was going over for something else because Nick Griffin was speaking in Glasgow that day.
Right.
And I said, you know what, I'm going to make a day out of this. I'm going to go over, protest, buy some new records, some CDs, because I'm not staying overnight, and I don't need a bag. I don't have to pay for a bag with Ryanair. And then I'm going to go to the game. Yeah. And I was disappointed when I got there to find out that Nick Griffin didn't show up. And a handful showed up. But it was a lot of guys that go to football without protesting. So, I get pissed off when people say, don't bring politics into sport or into football. But you have to bring it in because they're so linked. If we didn't, we had a rugby team in Ireland that went to South Africa, I've heard you before saying about, Thatcher called, Nelson Mandela a terrorist. Like, like, it just seems that, like, some of the ruling classes think, they can pick and choose when politics is involved in sport.
Yeah, Sebastian Coe is a good example. Sebastian Coe is constantly harping about keeping it out, but he wouldn't go to Moscow in 1980. He refused to go initially, saying, he couldn't support the regime and all that sort of stuff. So it's an intrinsic part of the terraces, right down to, I think the biggest issue of politics to do with football is even the pricing of football. That's a political issue. We understand as football supporters of both the left, the right and the centre that there's people, milking off money. It might be the politics of there being too much money from television and too much control by television, altering people's fixture lists, for example, and moving a game to a stupid Monday night. Or it might be the fact that you feel that the chairman who runs your club is taking out that amount of money. And so there's all these political debates going on all the time about, and as I said, from all angles, and I don't think it always follows that right-wing people come out with right-wing stuff to do with their own club. That doesn't always happen at all. In fact, they can be quite political and quite incisive when they see the way their club is being run. So politics is part of the way the game is run. From taking the knee to somebody taking a bribe. Do you know what I mean? From somebody being overpaid or to somebody being underpaid. Like, the whole game is riddled with different arguments. Even VAR, even to me, like the rules that Platini brought in about the tackle from behind, that was to protect footballers. That's an issue. Do footballers need protection, or are they getting too much protection? It's all to be debated. They wouldn't have all these sports channels if they had to just sit and talk about football. They talk about the ins and outs, the politics and the business all day long. We've had it at Sheffield United. We've got a member of an unelected royal family, Saudi Arabian royal family, coming on Sky Television and slagging our recently departed manager off. This is a person who's he's not a businessman. He's been born into money. He's got no experience of running a side. You have to get political about that, and then if you don't understand that somebody who runs a member of a royal family running your side, whether they be from Britain or Saudi Arabia, you've got to be pretty close to any way of thinking, really. But I think I'm careful. I don't rub people up. Try not to rub people up the other way, particularly when I'm conversing on social media, because social media it's like a toilet wall, isn't it?
Swamp.
Yeah. But I think also, particularly when you were travelling around Britain in the 70s, you used to see people putting racist graffiti, sexist, homophobic, graffiti everywhere. Those people have now got a computer, right? And they're on the screen. And if you put Celtic FC and they rub it off and put Dundee FC, that's the equivalent of the argument you're having. You rub it off and say, no, actually it's this. And it's too fast and it's not a good place for debate, I don't think. not quick debate. I think it's a mistake to get into a political argument on there, personally. I try and tone things down because I don't want to be one of these people who's just trying to get one up on people. I want the argument to be a sensible one, and one that I can... I don't want to just say, oh, you're wrong for saying that, or I won't call out anybody for saying the wrong thing. I try not to, not these days. But obviously I've got to keep to my views. I don't agree with people, but yeah, there's a lot of ignorance as well, and the ignorance has come out about the whole thing about lockdown has brought out a different set of ideas as well, and conspiracy theories, and people looking for different arguments. It amazes me, people trying to divide and rule so simply, like trying to divide us over masks and over lockdown, saying, oh yeah, but you shouldn't be wearing this and you should be wearing that. And I've had the first part of my vaccination. I've been wearing a mask, I've been careful, I've also had coronavirus, but I'm not going to go telling people you got to do this, you got to do that, because it's Boris Johnson absolutely loves that division in working class, absolutely loves it. If he can have two lots of marches, one in London on a Saturday and one in London on a Sunday, where they're getting angry, one are getting angry in favour of masks and the other getting angry against masks, he's got us absolutely there. When these people go on social media, say this and that, you're stupid, you're sheep, it's so divisive. My thing is with the government regardless. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up. We've had a disaster over here in Ireland with the vaccine, with the EU, because my mum and dad are in their 80s and they've just recently got their second injection. My mum and my father and mother-in-law are in the 70s and they haven't had the first injection yet. So it's, and the teachers who are back working now from today, all the schools are back open. They're saying they want to be vaccinated. The police officers are saying they want to be vaccinated. The childcare workers are saying they want to be vaccinated. And they've all got good cases. But what's happening now is you go on to social media or you go on to a debate on the TV and they're all the workers are fighting each other.
Yeah.
When the problem is, when they should be aiming their anger at the failed politicians who throughout Europe who have failed to get vaccines for the people or failed to lock down. We are now locking down in this country, Paul. We have the longest lockdown in Europe, but they've just decided recently that they're going to quarantine people coming into our airports. A year down the road, and it's just so frustrating that that now we have teachers arguing with guards and guards arguing with childcare workers, and it's disappointing. But again, it takes the attention off the government.
Yeah, on a sort of much lesser point, I noticed it right at the start of lockdown. I went out on my bicycle, and the anger on the road towards me as a cyclist had gone 10 times worse. And somebody made a comment against cyclists. I just said, look, I've gone out on this cycle, and they were just attacking me. This is on an account where they don't know who I am, by the way, because I've got a public one and another one. And I just said, why are you attacking? Oh, well, we're not allowed to play golf. I said, well, look, I really want you to be able to play golf. It makes a lot of sense you being able to play golf. You go out by yourself, you're at yards, some people. Oh, right, I didn't realise that. I thought you were against us. I was like, so they were trying to find a fight between a golfer and a cyclist. Like he was angry because the cyclist could cycle, assuming that the cyclist was flicking the V's up at him, saying, I can cycle, you can't do golf. It took me turning around to him and saying, I want you to be able to play golf. And oh, really? And so during a lockdown, during any crisis, the working class, I'm not saying golf is a working class, but working people are so easy to divide. Because there's this, my mum used to call it, was it Mrs. Jones's sausages? There's all this, she said during the war, right, there was all these rumours going, instead of everybody being united, there was always these rumours, do you know so-and-so, she's getting more sausages than us, right? It's because she's shagging the butcher. Like, you know, that Mrs. Jones is getting bigger packs of sausages or bigger packs of pork or whatever. And she said, that's exactly what's happening now. You know, people are saying, never mind what I've got, they've got that there, you know, and it's not a good time, is it, lockdown? Because people get really, really angry over small things, you know, and really willing to believe anything. You know, as we've seen with certain people, they'll believe anything that's on YouTube. People need to get back in the pub, because in the pub, if you said it, people would say, shut up, you daft idiot. You know what I mean? They just say, shut up, sit down. That's why you need the pub, don't you? Because you've got all these different people saying a load of crap. And when you do say a load of crap, you're quite rightly taking the piss out of for the rest of the month. So that instead, people are being sat in front of the computer say, oh, it's right, that, isn't it? It's right. People need people, don't they, to converse with.
But it's funny you should say that, because I've been saying that all season, because like I had to stop going on social media after games, because I was like, the anger on social media, like, you're pissed off enough if your team doesn't play well or they lose. But we had the pub to go to, or the bus to get back on. And there would always be an old guy, and, you know, especially on the bus, if a young lad was complaining about something, he would tell him about the bad times. And then, but when you're in the pub with your mates, it's good to argue with your mates, because it's not going to go any further. But if you're arguing with complete strangers, you know, like,
that's right.
Like, you don't know who they are, and you have an account, right? Like, I have an account for the fanzine and I have an account for myself, but everyone knows it's me and behind the fanzine. But at the same time, like, I've had people, you know, but I've got a great thing on social media. I can ban and I can block. I'm not getting in a debate. You know, I get fans of other teams, you know, coming on and, you know, giving me a bit of grief. I'll just delete the comment and block them. I'm not getting in a debate with them, Paul. Maybe if I was in the pub, I might get in a debate with them. Although the last time I got in a debate in the pub was in Wales, and it was actually with Bows and Wrexham fans, and that was a sore debate, I'll tell you that much. That was after the old Wales game. I'm too old for all that now, Paul. Paul, I have a time machine, okay? And I always ask my guests to jump into the time machine. So, like, you've obviously had a great life, and I normally ask to take me back to a game, a gig, or a moment in their life. But because it's you, and take us back to a gig, Paul. What gig is there? A gig that stands out for Paul Heaton?
You mean a gig of somebody else's or one of mine?
No, one of yours. Well, do both.
I remember being taken to Frankie Valley in the Four Seasons by my mum when I was 17. And that was incredible. That was the atmosphere. And it was just in a tiny hall. They'd not had that sort of reboot of their career. It was in Lewisham Town Hall in South London. And it was amazing. Just wooden seats and Frankie Valley running up and down the aisles. That was just amazing. For myself, probably a really good one or a bad one. There was a bad one in a place called Deventer in Holland, and we had no. Actually, no, there's a worse one. With the Housemartins, there was one in Kings Lynn or Norwich, you know, right over that way. And we got to the venue, and there was a poster outside with just a question mark on it, which was just like, what's happening? And we said to the promoter, why didn't you put our name up? And he said, I thought that would get more people. So when we got into the venue and came on stage, he just filled the whole venue with dry ice, you know, with smoke. But as the dry ice settled down, it went down and there was just two people in there. But yeah, just silly things like that. It makes you realise if there's nobody there and you still do the gig, there's something about it that you it's weird to explain, but you know something's going to happen. You feel as though if you're able to do that, play in front of nobody, you're able to do everything. You know, absolutely everything. Probably the other one was when the Housemartins supported Madness at Hammersmith Odeon, and we were just giving it through a friend of a friend sort of thing, and nobody knew us, and we were so nervous. We'd never played anywhere like that. And I just went on stage and I sort of just went into, I wasn't normally like that, I just went into overdrive. and just started shouting at the audience, going, "Come on, you love us!" And it went down quite well. So, and obviously the Ireland ones. The first time we played in Belfast, first time we played in Dublin. A couple of other little ones, Killarney, when we played with the Beautiful South in 2005 or 6. That was really good to go down there. And yes, some of the American ones were very funny. Yeah, they've all been funny and good in a different way,
Yeah, well, if I could climb in, Paul, to that time machine with you, I'd definitely go back to the SFX, because that was the first gig I was at, proper gig. I'd seen the Century Steel Band in school.
Right.
And my mates were in a ska band, Trenchdown, so I'd seen them. But to go to see the Housemartins was like, it was a big deal, and it was kind of scary at the same time, because where the SFX is, in a city of the north, not in a city in Dublin, and it's first time up and brilliant. But I'd also have to go back to a little gig you done out the road from me in a little pub in Slane.
Oh, yeah.
When there was 70 people at the gig.
That's right, yeah.
And how I got the tickets was, that was a hush-hush gig. Boyles, yeah. I was in a hush-hush. Oh, sorry, it was a hush-hush gig. No one knew about it. But I was in a taxi with my son, Connor. It's a good few years ago, because he was still coming to the football with me. And we were in a taxi going to the League Cup final in Glasgow.
Right.
And I got a phone call from Anton Judge, who's a musician. And he says, "You're not going to believe this." He says, "I done a gig last night in Boyles and Slane. And after the gig, we were packing up. And the owner came over. And he says, or the landlord, and he says, "You'll never guess who I have. But it's hush-hush, He said, "I've got Paul Heaton." And he was going, "Oh, right." He says, "No, don't tell anyone." So he knows I'm a bit of a fan, so he rings me. So I had to ring a mate, Hilly, who wasn't over at the game, who normally goes to the game with me. So this was a stroke of fate. And I says, "Look, after the game, you need to get over to Boyles and Slane." So he managed to get 4 tickets. So myself, Sandra, Hilly and Orla went to the gig. And we were sitting, like we were in early, Paul, we had our feet on the stage. Right. And I remember the gig so well. I remember you finished with Clash Number, I think. It was just bizarre. Yeah. But if I went back, Paul, I wouldn't tell anyone at the gig either, but I'd make sure all my mates that I go on the bus to see Paul Heaton when it's a big gig, I'd make sure they were with me, because we go as a group, and like we'd only 4 tickets, and to have to say to the others, "Look, we've no tickets." Yeah. But it was just amazing. And for your encore, you went off and stood in the corner and came back on stage.
Yeah, I remember. He was a really nice lad, the bloke who ran the pub. He just sent me an email and just said, "Look, do you fancy doing it?" And then, like a couple of years later, I started doing the cycling gigs. And actually, in 2012, I cycled, all the way around England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. And I played tiny little places, played in Kinvara. Is it Kinvara, over on the west coast? And tiny places. Played a little bar in Wexford, and everywhere. But I've enjoyed it all, really. Enjoyed it all. It's all been good.
Well, there too that stick out. But I was telling Sandra, because she's been on she's been at all the gigs with me over the years, and when the Beautiful South, that's my wife. When the Beautiful South had come out, I think it was the first album, Paul. I think it's played the Point Apple, which was a big step up from the Housemartins, because you were still playing like the Olympias, the SFXs, but the last bus to Drogheda was 11 o'clock then, and we were thinking we might have to leave the gig early, because it's a bit of a walk into the bus station. So we said, "Look, we'll get a B&B in Gardner Street." And Gardner Street is a bit of a, as Peter said, when they stayed in Gardner Street, when they supported Jersey, he said it was they stayed in a lot of flea pits, but this was the worst flea pit. But we stayed in the Nutmarket bed and breakfast. Right. And when we got into the room, the lock was broken. So we went back down to reception, and we says, "Look, the lock's broken on the room." And this is, "Well, we've no rooms left. We've only got rooms that are 10 quid more."
Right.
And we were going, 10 quid, He didn't really have that. But eventually, I think we got we gave him a £5, and he gave us the extra room. So after the gig, we'd had a good few drinks. We went back into the room, and Sandra was making a cup of tea, and there was no milk. So
Right.
I says, well, why don't you pop down to the room with the broken lock and get the milk there? Because she had the TV.
Right.
So she pops down and she's gone a couple of minutes, comes back up to the room, and she comes in and she's kind of speechless. And I says, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she says, I've gone into the room, I've turned the light on, I've walked straight over, I've got the little milks, and I've turned around, and there's a couple naked
Oh,
making
geez.
love on the bed, you know. And I says, well, what did you say? She says, oh, just come in to get the milk. So she disappeared. So that's her fond memory of a beautiful South gig in Dublin. We were just chatting about it today, actually. Paul, before I let you go, I just want to ask a quick question about the pub in Salford. What was the story?
It was, it was a pub I was rehearsing at upstairs, and the owners they'd let it go really, and they were going to sell it to somebody. I can't remember, it was like a Wetherspoons type thing, and it really wasn't that sort of place. So I sort of put together a rescue package and took it on for probably about 2.5 years, 3 years, until I could find somebody I trusted to buy it off me. So I got one of the bar staff to sort of gradually buy it off me over a period of years, a couple of years. So I sold it probably about 5 years ago, and up until the lockdown, they were doing very well out of it. They got all the music back up. So I didn't have it for very long, but it was a good little pub.
So it was a case of you didn't want it to go to the likes of Witherspoons.
Yeah, it was more that. Yeah, I can't remember if it was them or somebody was going to turn it into flats. I can't remember. I think it was more that the landlord was pressurising the people who owned it into turning it into flats. They didn't want to get into an argument with the landlord, and I sort of took it over and then managed to sort of eke out a package where we kept it open. So it's still open now. That's the main thing.
Did you write a song about that?
No.
Because there was just lyrics in it. I can't think of the song, but there's lyrics in it about the old boys in the pub playing dominoes and that. And I thought maybe that was something to do with it.
That was probably one of the other pubs I visited.
Possibly. Paul, I know you don't do podcasts, so I feel honoured to have you on the show. It's been brilliant. You've been so honest and so what I expected. So you didn't come on and bare your Celtic soul, but you bared your soul to us, and it was lovely to get a bit of an insight into this amazing career and how normal you still are.
Well, cheers, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, hope you have a good season next season.
Oh, hopefully.
Yeah.